The only woman on Tennessee's death row is asking the courts to reconsider her death sentence. Christa Pike was convicted in 1996. She and two other people tortured and killed 19-year-old Colleen Slemmer.
When we talk about prison, most of us are even scared just to visit the place because of the hardened criminals locked away in there. But what if even the deadliest of criminals are afraid to share a cell with an inmate? How dangerous is that inmate? Why should they be feared so much? From Christa Pike, who terrified the entire town of Knoxville, Tennessee with her heinous crimes, to Janine Jones, who has killed more children than the pandemic. Let's see what makes these women feared by not only the general public, but even by their fellow inmates. Are they really that terrifying? Christa Pike's violent behavior and attempted murder plot in prison? You might be wondering who Christa Pike is and why the thought of sharing a room with her Dutchie is a nightmare even for the most dangerous of criminals, right? Well, she's a nightmare. Christa Pike in Beckley, West Virginia in the United States, to Carissa Hansen and Emil Glenn. However, the family's relationship was nothing less than a toxic bomb ready to explode. And who will it affect the most when it does? That's right, little Miss Christa Pike. Christa's parents were in a really toxic relationship. From attempted suicide to acts of infidelity, they were what you might call unfit to raise a child, even though they had one. Her parents often had really serious fights over the smallest of things for the 2 years they were married. No matter what they did, it seemed like that family wasn't just meant to be. After a year into their marriage, Christa's mother, Carissa Hansen, filed for divorce after she caught her husband, Glenn, cheating. Apart from the constant fights they experienced in their home on a regular basis, this was the first heartbreaking moment for Teresa as she was just a little child. Might this be the reason why she turned out to be the cold-hearted killer we know today? Let's find out. Despite being hurt by the action, Christa's mother still loved her trifling husband. After a few months of their divorce, Christa's dad, Glenn, came up with the perfect plan to get his family back, as she was most definitely lost without them. Glenn threatened to commit suicide if Christa's mother did not get back together with him. Can you imagine the sort of trauma such action can cause on a child as little as Christa was? But because of the love she had for him, Carissa Hansen, Christa's mother, took him back in. What do you think if you were Carissa, would you take him in? According to Christa's family, both her parents were really negligent. One of Christa's even noted that infant Christa as a child would be crawling around through piles of dog stool all over the house. And that's not all. According to the aunt, Christa's mother, Carissa Hansen, wanted to keep partying even when she received news that her toddler, Christa, was experiencing severe seizures. These are definitely no conditions for raising a child, don't you think? Due to their irresponsibility, Christa's parents would often get criticism from their neighbors and other relatives. Christa's grandparents, too, didn't just sit there and watch their granddaughter suffer as a baby. They would often chip in to help around every time they got. Here's for the grandmas out there. The situation with her parents was so bad that Christa herself always said that she felt as if her grandmother was the only one who loved her. However, things took a dark turn for the 12-year-old Christa when her grandmother died. It was in 1988 when Christa heard of the news, and she was extremely devastated by it. Imagine the only one in your life who actually showed you love and care passing away, leaving you with your parents, who barely show you any love at all. How would you feel? The times were especially hard for Christa. She even recalls attempting to commit suicide. Imagine a 12-year-old child attempting suicide while both her parents are still alive. This gives you an insight into the broken family dynamics Christa Pike grew into. Maybe her case could be a matter of nature more than nature. Moreover, you'd think that the suicide attempt would be a wake-up call for Carissa and Glenn to start focusing on their child, but it was the contrary. None of them paid any attention or showed support to their little girl. And just as we thought, the broken dynamics of her family really had a noticeable impact on Christa's life, and it wasn't positive at all. Most of the kids during that time, whenever they faced instability back at home, receded to schools, where they found comfort in their friends and some teachers, right? Not Christa. School, which was supposed to be her escape from the harsh reality of her home, also came with some challenges. She was often a victim of bullying, and she always pushed right back. Despite not starting the fight most of the time, Christa was the one who got punished because of her parents' bad reputation, criticism at school, and hostility at home. No wonder she turned out the way she did. To add to the turmoil of this young lady was the constant abuse her mother's boyfriends inflicted on her. At some point, One of her mother's multiple boyfriends punched her in the face. She filed charges, but the man went off with a slap on the wrist. Because her parents had divorced again and were living in different homes, Christa had to alternate between the homes every once in a while. One time, while staying at her father's place with his new family, one of her younger sisters wrongfully accused Christa of molesting her. This made her father really mad, to the point that he chased her out of the house. This was just the tip of the iceberg of torture the young Christa was going through as a child. She even reported being molested on several occasions with very little cause of action being taken. This shows just how much torment Christa was going through under her parents' care. Christa's relatives recall her being bright in school. However, her constant traumas at home and bullying in school often led to her changing schools regularly. This critically impacted her studies, and her performance in school eventually started to deteriorate. Christa's troubled childhood took a significant toll on her. She began committing small crimes and various acts of violence in school and in the streets. One time, a man threatened to rape her, and Christa and her friend allegedly hit him hard with a stick. Well, it serves the man right, don't you think? However, Christa had developed a string of bad habits. From lying to stealing, she had become a bad seed. By 10th grade, Christa was already a juvenile for her crimes. While in Juvenile, she found solace in a government program aimed at helping low-income youth by offering vocational training and career skills. They called it Job Corps, and it benefited most youth, including Christa. In the fall of 1994, Pike attended the now-closed Job Corps Center in Knoxville, Tennessee. She had been through so much already as a child, and the world was yet to see her worst. After Juvenile, Christa found herself a partner, but instead of bringing out the best in her, Christa's boyfriend, Tadarrell Shipp, only let out another demon Christa was keeping hidden. Together, Christa and Shipp began practicing the occult and devil worship. But even despite seeing the amount of danger she was putting herself into, Christa was madly in love with Shipp. And they say love can make you do crazy things, right? Well, I doubt if you would do something as crazy as what Christa Pike did. Christa's conviction and death sentence for her, gruesome. In 1995, Christa Pike, who was always known for her violent nature, shocked her schoolmates and the entire city of Knoxville, Tennessee. According to reports, Christa became jealous of her Job Corps classmate, 19-year-old Colleen Slemmer, who, according to Christa, was trying to steal her boyfriend from her. According to Slemmer's friends, Christa was lying about the whole story. After all, she had the reputation of a pathological liar. Christa, feeling like no one cared about her feelings, planned to take the law into her own hands. Along with her 18-year-old friend Shadola Peterson, Christa planned to lure Slemmer to an isolated, abandoned steam plant near the University of Tennessee campus, where she would execute her not-so-well-thought-out plan. On that fateful day, on the 12th of January 1995, Christa, her boyfriend Shipp, her friend Peterson, and Slemmer, who would later become a victim of madness, all signed out of the dormitory and proceeded to the woods, where Slemmer was told they wanted to make peace by offering her some weed. On arriving at the scene, Christa and Peterson attacked the unaware Slemmer while Shipp acted as a lookout. According to reports, Christa and her friend Peterson tortured and beat Slemmer for almost 30 whole minutes. Can you imagine the torment? The two girls, in addition to the beating, carved a pentagram on Slemmer's chest right before Christa smashed Slemmer's skull with a large chunk of rock, killing her on the spot. It is also reported that Christa kept a piece of Slemmer's skull after cracking it wide open. For a girl who was once a bright student in her class, toping in her exams, this was unimaginable. What had turned her into such a monster? After the incident, Christa didn't seem to be bothered by the crime. In fact, she went around school showing off the piece of Slemmer's skull she had taken. It didn't take long, however, for the police to arrest Christa and her friends. They had committed a crime but didn't even bother to cover their tracks. According to the dorm logbook, Christa, Shipp, Peterson, and Slemmer left together, but only 3 returned. Where was the other one? Just a small slip like this was what pinned the 3 as the main suspects in the crime. The police immediately began their investigation of the 3, asking the hard question and eventually choosing to search their property. What the police found was shocking, especially for the school. What was a 10th grade girl doing with a human skull in the pocket of her jacket? This crucial piece of evidence firmly pinned Christa to the crime. She and her friends were taken in for further questioning. Soon after her arrest, Christa confessed to the police the torture and killing of Slemmer. However, she tried to defend herself by insisting that they were merely trying to scare her and it got out of control. Christa found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Christa's trial was not difficult for the jury to decide. The immense evidence presented before the court, including the victim's skull, assisted by Christa's confession, made it easy to rule over the case. Christa was charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. On the 22nd of March 1996, Christa was found guilty on both accounts, and on March 30th, she was sentenced to death by electrocution for the murder charge and 25 years in prison for the conspiracy charge. I guess Christa wasn't the little girl genius the town of Tennessee thought they knew. Christa's boyfriend, Ship, on the other hand, received a life sentence with the possibility of parole plus 25 years in prison. As for her friend Peterson, she decided to collaborate with the police as an informant. She was given probation for pleading guilty to being an accessory after the fact. Christa was 20 when she was convicted, making her the youngest woman to be sentenced to death in the United States during the post-Furman period, a time when the United States Supreme Court made a ruling that rendered all existing legal frameworks for the death penalty invalid or no longer enforceable. Now we know why she is feared by her mates and the whole town of Knoxville, Tennessee. But why is she among the list of the most feared women in prison? Why don't we look at how, instead of the four walls of a county jail and a death sentence, making Christa rethink his actions and maybe be more remorseful actually made her even more violent? Christa's time in Tennessee Women's Prison. In her time at Tennessee Women's, Christa did not accept the outcome of her actions immediately. She launched an appeal of her convictions in 2001, which later had a dramatic twist to it. Yes, Christa had applied for an appeal of her case, meaning she hoped not to be sentenced to the death penalty, right? However, unlike what we all expect, in 2002, Christa then went to the very courts to ask the courts to drop her appeal even against her lawyer's advice. Instead, she additionally asked the court to continue with their initial verdict to execute her via electrocution. Can you imagine the guts of this lady? Was this an effect of her troublesome childhood? The decision came as a shock to most who were present during the trials, especially criminal court judge Mary Beth Leibowitz, who presided over the hearing. The judge granted the request, and an execution date of August 19, 2002 was set. But she soon realized how dumb her decision was. She changed her mind, and soon after that, on July 8, 2002, Christa applied for an appeal yet again. Can you believe the audacity she had? I mean, she was literally treating the courtroom as her playground. Her defense lawyers filed a motion to allow the appeal process to continue, but the court was tired of the games Christa was playing. They denied the request. However, to Christa's luck, on August 2, 2002, a three-judge state appeals court panel ruled that the proceedings should be continued, and the execution was not carried out. However, the postponement of her sentence didn't last long. A few years later, in December 2008, Christa applied for an appeal yet again, which would end up being her last. Her request for a new trial was turned down, and she was returned to death row, involved in an attempted murder plot against another inmate. Apart from endless court battles, Christa's prison life came with a lot of dramatic turns of events. On August 24, 2001, while serving her time in Tennessee, Christa, with the help of another inmate, Natasha Cornett, attacked and attempted to strangle fellow inmate Patricia Jones with a shoestring. They nearly succeeded in choking her to death if it wasn't for one tiny mishap. The victim, Jones, had been serving a life sentence for the 1994 murder of 84-year-old Alberta Coker in Knoxville at the time of her attack. Christa and her partner were both charged with attempted murder. However, despite the Tennessee Department of Corrections believing that Cornett was involved in the crime in some way, after conducting an investigation, they determined that there wasn't enough evidence to formally charge her with participating in or assisting Pike in attacking Jones. Sadly, for our friend Christa, she was convicted of attempted first-degree murder on August 12, 2004. You'll be surprised how these turns of events still weren't enough to kill Christa's spirit. Later, while still serving her sentence, she was involved in yet another incident, making her already bad situation even worse. According to prison reports, in March 2012, it was revealed that Christa made plans to escape the Correctional Institute. She sought the help of Corrections Officer Justin Heflin and a New Jersey man named Donald Kohut. Though not much has been disclosed on the case in particular, and no one knows exactly how Donald and Christa started to talk, there are speculations about what might have transpired. Kohut was, at the time, a personal trainer in his early 30s. They started by writing to each other almost regularly around the beginning of 2011. By July of the same year, she had already started making the nearly 1,700-mile road trip from Flemington, New Jersey to Nashville, Tennessee, to visit Christa in person on visiting days once or twice a month. Was this a romance thing? Apparently not. Eventually, after being careful, well, not so careful because they got caught, they were still careful in some way. Kohut told Christa about her escape plan. Now, the question we are all asking ourselves is, why should some stranger take an interest in Christa after all the horrid stuff she has shown the more laid-back town of Knoxville, Tennessee? The two sought the help of corrections officer Heflin, who agreed to participate in return for cash and gifts. Sadly for us, because of security concerns, the Tennessee Department of Corrections has not provided many details about the plan. But as we can all see, it was an inside job. However, the unsealed indictment eventually provided details about a scenario in which a prison key was traced, perhaps copied, and then used to create a duplicate. But we all know they were just trying to cover their behinds. According to reports, in 2012, prison personnel received information about the escape plot. The attempted prison break raised concern and ultimately led to a collaborative investigation. The investigation involved multiple agencies, including the Tennessee Department of Corrections, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, and the New Jersey State Police. In a report that the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation gave, the plan was not very far along when uncovered, and the jailbreak was not imminent. Maybe, for a fact, they hadn't really thought the plan through. In March of the same year, Kohut was arrested and charged with bribery and conspiracy to commit escape, while Heflin was arrested and charged with bribery, official misconduct, and conspiracy to commit escape. For it was unclear to the investigators if Christa was a participant in the conspiracy or just aware of it. She was not charged. On May 31, 2012, Kohut was sentenced to 7 years in prison to be served at the Tennessee State Northeast Correctional Complex. Heflin, who cooperated with authorities after his arrest, served no prison time but was terminated from his job with the Tennessee Department of Corrections. Now you can see why you should be afraid if you were ever put in the same jail cell as Christa Pike. Christa's execution. If you all remember, 2020 was the year we all thought the world was coming to an end because of the COVID-19 virus. Well, the same year came as a lucky one for Christa. The outbreak of corona in most parts of the world, including Tennessee, forced the Tennessee County Court to grant Christa's attorneys extensions, allowing them more time to argue as to why Christa should not be executed. The state did not oppose the extensions. I mean, how could they? With the country trying to figure out a way to stop the hefty pandemic, Christa was given a little more time on Earth. On June 7, 2021, Pike's attorneys filed a motion to oppose the execution date and request a certificate of commutation. But as if in a constant loop between the court and Christa, the motion was denied. As of November 2022, Christa had already exhausted all her appeals, but a glimmer of hope came for the convicted felon in November 2022 when the state Supreme Court found that the state's law for juveniles automatically sentenced to life in prison without a chance at parole was unconstitutional. This meant that all convicted felons who did their crime while juveniles could not be convicted of life without parole. Does this mean that Christa Pike was going to be set free? Apparently not. On August 30th, 2023, lawyers for Christa used the November 2022 Supreme Court ruling as an attempt to reopen her bid to have her 1996 conviction and sentence thrown out. They argued her young age and damaged mental health at the time of the killing should spare her from facing execution. The court, however, did not buy this. In October 2023, Knox County Criminal Court Judge Scott Green denied the request. He said that the November 2022 Supreme Court ruling didn't apply to Christa. The Booker case addressed only juvenile offenders in Tennessee, Judge Green noted. The High Court, in the opinion written by now-retired Justice Sharon Lee, specifically addressed the question of juveniles, not adults. This ruling applies only to juvenile homicide offenders, not to adult offenders, the decision states. The judge wrote that Christa was legally an adult and that her ruling would stand. As of March 10, 2024, the state had not yet set an execution date for Christa yet. But if she is executed, Christa would not only be the youngest woman to be sentenced to death, but would also be the first woman to be executed in Tennessee in roughly 200 years. Christa's a scary one, isn't she? But no one said she was the only one. Many women have been convicted of heinous crimes and are considered extremely dangerous. Why don't we look at the story of Janine Jones, whose actions were just unthinkable? Janine Jones. Just like Christa, Jones didn't have a normal childhood either. Her parents left her, and she found refuge when a nightclub owner and his wife adopted her. When Jones was grown, her parents assisted her in getting multiple gigs as a beautician before attending nursing school in the late 1970s. She was bright and had a decent job. What happened? Unlike Christa, whose relationship with Ship was merely a matter of testing the waters, Jones' love life was entirely of turmoil. Despite marrying her high school sweetheart, her marriage wasn't all a bed of roses. The two were married for a couple of years, between 1968 and 1974, and during this period, they were blessed with one child. Then why give all these away? Their high school romance turned into marriage. However, it didn't last long. A few years after their marriage, they both got tired of each other and went through a divorce. But just like Christa's parents, Jones and her husband reconciled 3 years later after finding out they still had feelings for each other. They had another child in 1977. However, just like the first time, the two got tired of each other and filed for divorce yet again. Jones found comfort in a much younger man after this period. They were already showing us how morally deficient she actually is. She married a 19-year-old nursing assistant, but their so-called relationship didn't last long either. He filed for divorce a short time later. Did Jones have something that kept the men in his life away? Even despite her relationship turmoil, Jones had an excellent career as a licensed vocational nurse in the pediatric intensive care unit at the Bexar County Hospital, a public hospital district for the San Antonio, Texas, U.S. metropolitan area. However, her time there was accompanied by cases that scared the entire town of San Antonio, Texas. According to reports from the hospital, the highest number of people died under her care. News like this can be detrimental to the hospital if it is ever made public. That's why the Bexar County Hospital made a critical decision to let go of all its licensed vocational nurses, including Jones herself. Instead, they replaced the pediatric ICU staff with registered nurses. This move did not stop the bad news from spreading, but it prevented the police from taking an interest in the case. Hence, no investigation was carried out. It sounds to me like the hospital played some cards. Was this it for Jones? Well, apparently not, as she went on to look for yet another job. She took yet another position at a pediatrician's clinic in Kerrville, Texas, some 60 miles northwest of San Antonio. Why go so far away, Jones? What are you hiding? Was Jones responsible for the disappearance of those kids back at the Bexar County Hospital? The truth would come to light soon enough. It was at her new workplace that she was charged with poisoning 6 children. According to the hospital's report, the doctor in the office at the time of the incident discovered 2 puncture marks in a bottle of succinylcholine, a medication used to cause short-term paralysis as part of general anesthesia. According to the doctor, only he and Jones had access to the drug storage, and because it wasn't him, it must have been Jones. The question is, what did she want the drug for? A powerful drug that causes temporary paralysis of all skeletal muscles, as well as those that control breathing, can be dangerous for an adult, let alone a baby. Imagine a drug that, under the influence of it, you cannot do something as vital as breathing. What could it do to a baby? In fact, scientists prove that in small children, the drug can cause serious effects, including cardiac arrest, as a result of deoxygenation due to a lack of respiration in the body. Now, what makes Jones's case even more interesting is the response she gave when asked why she did what she did. Jones claimed she was trying to stimulate the creation of a pediatric intensive care unit in Kerrville. This is the worst excuse ever, don't you think? Jones's prosecution. Jones was arraigned before the court in 1985, where she was initially sentenced to 99 years in prison. Her charges were killing 15-month-old Chelsea McClellan with succinylcholine. But this wasn't all. On August 30th of the same year, Jones was added to other charges of harming Brandy Benitez, Chris Parker, and Jimmy Pearson. In addition to these cases, Jones also reportedly harmed Misty Reichenau on September 3rd and Jacob Evans on September 17th. According to the court, the nurse intentionally and knowingly harms the children by injecting them with succinylcholine or some other drug. She would later serve her sentence of a concurrent term of 60 years in prison for nearly killing Rolando Santos with heparin. Why was the nurse on a child-killing rampage? Jones was sent to the Lane Murray Unit, a women's prison of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice located in Gatesville, Texas. However, soon afterward, Jones was scheduled for mandatory release in 2018 due to a Texas law meant to prevent overcrowding in prisons, but the state could not let such a menace go on scotch-free. She was indicted on May 25, 2017, for the murder of 11-month-old Joshua Sawyer. There were other charges in addition to the ones put on Jones, and according to the Texas County Court, they added the other cases to prevent her from getting an early release. Apparently, due to the clause to reduce overcrowding in the prisons, Jones would be released early, and to prevent this, the court had to add the other charges. According to Nico LaHood, the Bexar County District Attorney who was put in charge of Jones's case, the additional charges could be filed for the deaths of other children. But that meant that if the mandatory release in 2018 were passed, Jones would walk away free of charge, a risk that the state of Texas was not willing to take. In April 2018, a judge in San Antonio denied a request to dismiss 5 new murder indictments against Jones. However, on January 16, 2020, Jones pleaded guilty to the murder of 11-month-old Joshua Sawyer on December 12, 1981. Her lawyers had advised her to take the plea and, in her favor, 4 charges were dropped. Jones was sentenced to life in prison without any possibility of parole until she was roughly 87 years old. Following the sentencing in 2020, the families of the victims expressed a mix of relief and ongoing grief. For many, justice had been long overdue, and Jones's guilty plea was a bittersweet acknowledgement of the pain and loss they had endured for decades. The case has left a lasting impact on the medical community, prompting hospitals and healthcare facilities to implement stricter oversight and monitoring of staff to prevent similar tragedies. The methods Jones used, including the administration of dangerous drugs like succinylcholine and heparin, have since been heavily scrutinized, leading to improvements in the detection of drug misuse in medical settings. Jones's actions have also been the subject of psychological studies aimed at understanding the motivations behind medical professionals who harm patients. Some experts have speculated that Jones's behavior may be linked to a phenomenon known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy, where a caregiver causes harm to someone in order to gain attention or sympathy. However, her exact motives remain unclear, as Jones has never provided a complete explanation for her actions. The case continues to serve as a reminder of the potential dangers within trusted institutions and has led to calls for reforms in how healthcare professionals are vetted and monitored. You can see why even the most dangerous prisoners would fear sharing a cell with these women.